Hello, my world history students. Today is going to be our first lesson of the week. There's going to be two video lessons this week. The first one today, we're going to be doing some review. So we're going to be talking about the Catholic Church, the significance of it, and we're going to be talking about the language of Latin and why it's used, and if it's really a dead language. So again, these topics should be familiar to you. We've done them in class before, but we are going to delve a little deeper into Catholicism and why it was such a big institution during the Middle Ages. Okay, so let's start with the significance of the Catholic Church. Millions of Americans attend religious services each week. To many, the Catholic Church they attend is a powerful part of their lives. Besides worship, churchgoers work under the umbrella of their church to help in their communities, fund and support outreach programs, and give a portion of their earnings, also known as tithing. The Catholic Church has power today, but it was much, much more powerful in Europe, okay, back in the Middle Ages. The Roman Catholic Church yielded immense power over people. Not only did it influence the Christian religion, but its power found its way into the culture as well. From paintings to plays to education to the courts, the church left its impression on just about every aspect of your life. Church leaders preached that a person must belong to get to heaven. If a person didn't belong, they were destined to spend eternity in hell. This concept frightened many of the church's followers so much that they were willing to do just about anything the church demanded. And the church required a great deal from their parishioners. Everyone is expected to pay a tax of 10% of their income. Even those who were without money were supposed to pay the tax. How would you do that if you don't have a job? Many had only crops to give, but others handed over the money and struggled to live without it. So if you were a destitute farmer and you had no money to give to the church, you could give goods or you could volunteer your time, okay? It was really important that you interacted with the church and that you were tithing. So remember, tithing is money donated to the church. The church was the largest landowner in all of Europe, and its wealth rivaled that of monarchs and upper class. In addition to land, the church amassed a vast fortune in tithes. It could use this money and bounty as it pleased. At times, the funds were used to help the less fortunate, but they were also used to build churches of such quality that some still stand today. So those beautiful stone churches that we see that are just gorgeous in architecture, okay? The money at the time needed to build churches of that structure and that fancy of materials. They needed money to ship the goods from overseas to build these cathedrals. All right. The church constructed also large buildings to store massive amounts of collected seed and grain. Unfortunately, these items were often ruined by rodents who would get into the food and ruin it for other people, and they would not be able to eat it. The Pope, who was, and still today, the head of the Catholic Church, had the ear of many of the monarchs. Not only was he their spiritual advisor, but he also gave his opinion on all matters of state. The Pope and his abbots had the power to excommunicate or keep someone from participating in religious activities. If a monarch was a non-believer, the church might yield its ability to free that monarch's people from any oath that they might have given to the leader. In this regard, the church had as much power, if not more, than kings, queens, and emperors. Excuse me. So if you remember that feudal pyramid I had you draw and remember the different levels, the Pope was at the very top above the monarchs. The Pope had more power and influence than the kings and queens of the time because they had to answer to the Pope, okay? They were a direct descendant of God who, as king or queen, had the power to rule over the people. But without the Catholic Church's blessing, they couldn't actually rule. Records show that during the medieval period, there were frequent disagreements that took place between monarchs and the Christian papacy, which is the Pope. These disagreements were not a competition between church and state, but were instead power struggles between popes and kings of that period. Evidence shows that Pope Gelasius I pushed this option in his letter to Emperor Anastasius in 494 CE. He wrote that while both the church and emperors ruled the world, it was the priests who were more critical because they had the connection to God. He also said that the emperor should bow down to the church. He also told his followers that the Pope had the power to depose or remove emperors. If you were excommunicated from the Catholic Church, you were basically shunned from all of society. If you didn't belong to a church or a religion, you had no community. So that was people's greatest fear, besides dying at the time, was being excommunicated from the church. That is kind of like holding back that safety net of community, okay? All right, so we learned about the significance of the Catholic Church, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about Latin and why the language of Latin is not used today. So, most students have the opportunity to learn other languages in school. When choosing which language to study, many students think about their ancestry or how the usage of words might help them in the future. So if you have a Spanish-speaking family, you'll probably take Spanish in school. Or if you have German heritage or Italian heritage, a lot of times you will try to learn the language so that you can speak with older family members who maybe don't speak English. Or it's just nice to learn more about the culture of or the ethnicity of where you grew up. All right. When choosing which language to study, many students think about their ancestry or how the usage of words might help them in the future. Still, others might look to a family member and follow in their footsteps. Both of my parents spoke Dutch, so I learned Dutch at a young age, and I studied it in school as well because I would be able to speak with my parents and grandparents in Dutch that way. Many students in our schools speak a second language at home. However, most schools don't teach all languages, which is true, like we only offer Spanish right now. Many students in our schools speak a second language. However, most schools don't teach all the languages. One language option that might appeal to you is Latin. Knowing some basic Latin will help you with English vocabulary, tests, and it will help you on your college entrance exams. Remember, most of the modern English language has Latin roots, prefixes, and suffixes that show you the etymology of words or where the words come from. The tiny nation of Vatican City, remember guys, Vatican City is its own country within a country, okay? So Vatican City is in the city of Rome, which is in the country of Italy, okay? Very, very interesting that the Vatican City is considered its own country. Vatican City still speaks Latin as their official language, but it's often thought of as a dead language. It's not, though. Latin still influences the English language today. The English language has many words with Latin roots. You couldn't inflate a tire without Latin. The Latin word inflare gives us the English word inflate. The word scholar is always Latin because scholar comes from the Latin word scholaris. Today's pencils have Latin connection as well. The Latin word erasus means to erase. Have you ever heard a U.S. Marine say Semper Fi? I know I have. It's kind of like their motto or their saying for the Marines. Semper Fidelis means always faithful or loyal. Harvard University's motto is also in Latin. It's simply Veritas, which means truth. Look at the back of a coin. So get a coin out and you'll be able to see the words e pluribus unum. That's Latin for out of many, one. We use Latin for scientific classification and terminology in medicine. We base nearly half our language on Latin. That certainly doesn't sound dead or mortis, does it? So, again, Latin has a lot of prefixes and suffixes that we use today in our English language. So it's really cool to know that even though it's a dead language, it has its roots in modern English language. Okay, so really quickly, I want to go over some more about the Catholic Church. We find Catholic churches in numerous cities around the world. They are often large, ornately decorated, And in big cities, Catholic cathedrals are even more ornate. Bishops selected by the Pope usually oversee the most significant buildings. So the bishops are like underneath the Pope, so they carry out the Pope's wishes, kind of like employees and a boss. They carry out what the Pope wants them to do in their home churches. So the big cathedrals, for instance, there's a big cathedral, St. Paul's in New York City, okay? There's a cardinal or a bishop that is in charge of that church and maintaining that church, and he answers to the Pope. More than 5,000 bishops serve large cities. Cathedrals are worth a visit merely to look at their breathtaking architecture. France, Italy, England, and Russia feature some fantastic feats of construction. To build grand cathedrals requires money, lots and lots of money. Remember, all the money comes from tithing from participants, okay? The Catholic Church has more than 1 billion members and a significant amount of capital or money. Think about that for a second. If 1 billion people tithe 10% of their income, or at least give a little bit, that's a lot of money for the Catholic Church to utilize. Not only is the wealth used for the construction and maintenance of cathedrals, but it's also used to wield political power and influence. For example, 1500 years ago, Pope Gelasius told the Roman emperor to bow before him. Do you remember that? And warriors lined up for the promise of forgiveness to fight in the Crusades. So if you fought in the Crusades, God would forgive all of your sins, okay, and you would be cleansed. Today, though, the Catholic Church still has political influence. In the US, John F. Kennedy became the nation's first Catholic president. Portions of the Senate and House of Representatives have Catholic members. Around the world, leaders gladly accept any audience with the Pope. Education has been influenced by the Church as well. Some of America's well-known universities are Catholic. The University of Notre Dame, Georgetown University, Boston College, and many private Catholic schools operate all over the United States. The monastic and mendicant orders grew out of the Catholic Church. Both groups believe the path to salvation is achieved without the trappings of modern society. Monks and nuns who live in monasteries refuse worldly possessions and devote their lives to spiritual work. In medieval times, this included copying Roman and Christian texts by hand. They were usually the only educated people around. Mendicant friars, on the other hand, embraced poverty. They survived by collecting charity, which often involves begging. All right, so that's just some recap about the Catholic Church, about the Pope, about Latin. Most of this should be really familiar to you guys since we've gone over it a lot in class, but I wanted you to hear from me and try to retain some of the information we've learned, okay? So last, I have two more things to show you. First, you should be printing out your CNN Challenge worksheet at the beginning of each week and filling it out. So by the time this video airs, you should have Monday and Tuesday filled out, okay? And then you're just waiting for the rest of the week. Again, if you do this and you fill it all 5 days out, you can show me in your Zoom meeting. And if you show me it's filled out, I will enter you to win an online gift certificate. So do the challenge. And today I'm going to have you write down some discussion questions from my video lecture. So I would encourage all of you to have a history notebook or some kind of notebook that you can write down these questions. Again, you can use a regular notebook, loose leaf paper. It's totally up to you and what you have at home. So I am going to show you my whiteboard with the questions, okay? I am going to pause the video so that you can write these down, okay, in your notebook. So here they are. Hopefully you can see them. I would suggest you pausing it right now so you can write it down, okay? So those are the questions you are going to answer for me, and then you can show me your answers in our Zoom meetings in the morning, okay? So remember, CNN Challenge, do the discussion questions, and I look forward to seeing your answers on Wednesday. All right, bye guys.